Welcome to the Rimworld mod rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Vanilla Skills Expanded. For starters, you'll need to own the additional workshop content, Vanilla Expanded Framework and Harmony. After covering some biblically powerful implants, let's look inwards and explore our colonists' innate proficiencies instead. Skills Expanded adds 3 new levels of passion as well as a mechanic for gaining expertise. Just like the powerful implants, to get the most out of this mod you're going to want to install Un-Limited Reborn. Otherwise a lot of the picks for your colonist expertise will do nothing, as they're already capped out on any potential impact by hitting level 15 in the skill. There are settings to change how few of these bits work in the mod options if you want to take it further, allowing you to increase the maximum expertise per colonist with it being just 1 by default. Given that it's supposed to be an expertise, increasing this number will quickly make colonists become overpowered and strip a lot of the impact from making this choice. I think Ron Swanson said it best.
Never half-ass 2 things. Whole-ass 1 thing.
You can disable the expertise available alert if it's bugging you, say if you've planned on specialising in a medical skill with that colonist, but they keep getting a reminder for one that they could unlock right away with animals. Multiple critical passions can basically cripple a colonist. We'll cover why in a little bit. If you don't want absolutely balked people in your world, you can disable it here. If you don't want to disable multiple critical passions, but also don't want it to be quite so ruinous, you can disable it from affecting other passions. Again, this will make more sense in a little bit. Expertise overlap won't do anything if you're only sticking to 1 expertise, but if you do want colonists to have multiple, this will allow you to pick, for example, 3 expertise in shooting. This can turn what's already a very powerful mechanic into something out of this world. The Rimworld, that is. And finally in the options, you can also mix up the commonalities of passions. If you like things like natural but don't want critical or apathy, you can simply drop them to 0 here and be done with them. Right, options done. Let's go to the new passions first. I mentioned a couple of settings with critical, and it's probably going to be the most involved of the 3 new levels. As you probably know, a normal skill has 35% learning speed, a standard passion is 100% and a burning passion is 150, all with 100% forgetting speed. A critical passion increases learning speed to 300% and completely removes the forgetting speed, at the cost of dropping the learning speed of all other skills to 25% of their value. So a standard passion is now just 25% and a normal skill is a mere 8.8. This is where settings come in. With colonists able to stack 2 critical passions, you'll find that their 300% learn speed becomes 75%, because the criticals hit one another. They're also applying twice the effect on other skills too. So a normal skill is now 2.2% learning speed. So you could either disable multiple critical passions to avoid this overlap effect, or remove the impact that critical passions have on other skills that a colonist has a passion in. That way they'll only be nerfing the learning speed on skills with no real interest to the colonist anyway.
Do I make myself clear?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
That's the only passion option you really need to worry about in terms of its broader impact. The other 2 are a lot more straightforward. Natural pushes the learning speed to 200%, but also triples forgetting speed, making it very easy to hit level 10 through doing the odd job here or there, but requiring focused and consistent work to actually progress in the skill meaningfully. Especially cruel in things like planting if you're in a biome with a 30-30 split on summer and winter. They forget entire levels of the skill over the colder months. Apathy is worse than having no passion at all in a skill, dropping learning speed to just 25% and increasing forgetting speed to 125%. Quite nice to give a little more life to colonists, giving them a step between doing work that they have no interest in and flat out refusing to do something, with them now doing a job whilst loudly sighing, dragging their feet and actively clock watching. Anyone who's worked in the service industry knows what I'm talking about.
Here's those plates you wanted, Chef.
That leads us neatly into the expertise choices then, with each skill having a handful of options. You'll only be able to pick an expertise that the colonist has at least a normal passion for. Someone uninterested in medicine doesn't exactly want to grow up to be a surgeon. Expertise choices will become available when the colonist reaches level 15 in that skill and can be accessed by pressing the star button on their bio screen. For the Murica skill, you have the choice between sharpshooting, aiming and reloading. Sharpshooting is going to increase the post-processing curve on your accuracy, with it reaching its peak effect at 1.1. To put that into perspective, a gun link provides +3, and just like how you wouldn't equip a gun link, you likely would never take this either. Quantity beats quality in Rimworld when it comes to bullets. Aiming starts at just a 5% reduction to aiming time, but will provide 105% when it hits level 20. Obviously, your aiming time cannot go into a negative value, so it'll just sit at 1%, turning every weapon into a quick draw special. Reloading will provide the biggest upside possible though, with it reducing cooldown factor to 47.5% at its highest impact. As always, there is a reason that it's hard to reduce this cooldown in base game, because it ends up making combat hilariously easy. Definitely the most powerful pick here for ranged combat. To make sure it's working as intended, you might need to reload your save after picking this specialisation. For the British street skill, you've got a couple of choices, either armour penetration or melee cooldown. Armour penetration might seem like a dud choice in comparison to the sheer speed that you can get from melee attacks, but it does have a handy niche. Blunt weapons are already hard enough to protect against, and this can further push that armour penetration of weapons like Warhammers or Zeus hammers high enough to completely negate any blunt armour that even high-tech factions or mechanoids come in with, making your damage incredibly reliable. No more bounces. Melee cooldown is the choice if you just want something dead, regardless of how many times they may deflect or absorb your attack, halving your melee attack speed at its highest effect, turning your colonist into your trusty blender. Construction comes loaded with 4 choices: flooring, repairing, architecture and building. Now, flooring is the obvious meme here, and I can't really defend it. Floor work speed is impacted by construction speed, and you can increase construction speed by picking building, with the values being exactly the same. So if you want to lay floor as efficiently as possible, take building, and you'll also be building your walls and structures 100% faster too. Repairing has some really niche uses, as it will allow you to repair faster than enemies can reliably damage your fortifications, letting you hold a breach point for a little bit longer whilst waiting for help to arrive. This also comes in handy with very specific runs, things like wave-based survival modes, when you barely have any time between fights to actually get your defences back in order. The easy choice here though is architecture. Whilst building is useful for getting your map-wide walls built in just a couple of days, architecture will give you the ability to fill your base with masterwork and legendary quality furniture, which just makes life overall a lot easier. Huge comfort buffs, faster rest, more impressive rec and dining rooms, solid buffs from your hospital beds. Just keep an eye on your wealth whilst doing this, as your base is about to become 3 times more expensive to live in with all of these bonuses. Mining gives you 4 choices too: drilling, prospecting, tunneling and geology. Drilling can be beneficial if you've got someone pretty much living on the ground penetrating scanner, or if you're using a mod to make it a passive scan rather than requiring constant manpower. As with plentiful resources constantly appearing underground, this just lets you hoover them up, rather than trying to stretch out their value. That's what prospecting is for. If you've landed on a map that's got sweet FA in terms of mountains and need to make all of your potential resources really count, this will stretch any veins, meteorites or underground clusters to provide a much greater yield, especially useful for things like plasteel and components, although you need to get this skill leveled up quite a ways before you see it actually impacting the yield on things like components. Tunneling is there if you're not digging for materials and just want things done, allowing you to breeze through mountains at lightning speed. This gets hilarious when paired with the drill arms, allowing you to dig an entire mountain base out in under a week. Geology is... yep. I mean, it exists, right? You could probably make use of this if you're using VFE mechanoids, as the chunks are normally the basic material for industrial production chains, but I've already covered mechanoids and I still don't think it's a justified pick. Maybe you just like rocks?
I like that boulder. That is a nice boulder.
Cooking gets you butchery, drug cooking, food hygiene and feeding. Butchery is a prime example of why you want something like Unlimited, as it lets you go above the caps enforced by base game, eventually letting you get more than 250% output from a single corpse. Perfect for making the most of Thrumbo fur, potentially a little bit overkill for meat though. Bodies will literally explode across the room in piles now. Drug cooking will boost the speed that colonists make smoke leaf joints, psychite tea, and wort. If you're using other modded drug options like vanilla brewing expanded, they're likely to fall under this. If the skill required to create a drug is listed as cooking in the preferred worker dropdown, it'll be using this stat. Food hygiene with Unlimited will actually allow you to get that mythical 0% food poisoning chance when creating meals. No more 0.1% spirals when someone feeds the colony raw chicken and causes an epidemic of vomit. Feeding is the most straightforward boost to cooking speed. If you're lacking in cooking manpower, this will allow a single chef to keep a colony fed with the more work-intensive meals, but you'll also need to have the option ticked with Unlimited to allow this to go above its post-processing curve, at the bottom of the normal toggles. Otherwise, the highest value for cooking speed will never go above 160%. With plants, you have foraging, pruning, harvesting, and sowing. Foraging can be weirdly handy in a couple of very niche scenarios, as a good forager can support a caravan of multiple people by themselves, allowing for much easier travel on the world map. Pruning will make dryads much less of a hassle to maintain, potentially doubling the trees that the colonists will be able to look after in the same amount of time, in turn growing your army of nerds. Harvesting is the easiest choice most of the time, increasing the plant yield, allowing you to either grow smaller fields of crops to sustain yourself or have massive excesses of food and materials that you can trade away to other factions. Extremely useful for things like Healroot and Devilstrand too, squeezing out as much value as possible from their lengthy growing times. Sowing is a route you can go if you've got more space to spare, letting you blanket the tile with crops as needed. This can be helpful with things like orchards if you're using plants expanded, making it very quick to get out rows and rows of fruit trees. Onto animals, you have taming, ranching, hunting, and handling. Taming is almost an essential pick if you want to make use of any big modded animals, as it'll stop your handler being absolutely flattened when they botch an attempt. Ranching allows you to get the most out of your animals before you then make good use of that butchery expertise, as this provides a much greater yield from animals whilst they're still alive. Milk, fur, neutro and hemogen if you're rocking regrowth core. This lets you keep your animal numbers down while still getting a good chunk of resources too, which saves you precious ticks, which is possibly the biggest benefit to this. Hunting increases your stealth value, which isn't really much use by the time you've got this skill up to be this high anyway, as chances are by the time you're able to progress animals to level 15, you've got good enough gear to kill any wild animals before the revenge proc actually matters. Even then, if you are worried about revenge chances, just bring more dudes. Handling is useful if you've got a steady stream of animals being born that can help with hauling or combat, reducing the chance that your colonists will screw up the training opportunities and burden you with derpy pets for a long time. When crafting, you can pick between disassembler, tailoring, weaponsmithing, or fabricating. Disassembly allows you to reach all the way up to 256% efficiency with maxed out stats, making things like a standard scyther drop around 38 steel, but let's face it, you'd have to be really resource starved to actually make any meaningful use out of this. Tailoring is a straight buff to speed, making it far easier to stay on top of keeping your colonists in their usual Devilstrand shirt, pants and duster combo. You basic bitch. Weaponsmithing does the same for armaments. This can be useful if you're trying to get lucky with your quality roll by repeatedly making guns for your colony, but you'll be flying through resources doing this, so it's probably best to keep an eye out for traders or quests for the nicer gear rather than going this route. Fabricating is the most reliable expertise for crafting, boosting component creation speed. I know this sounds really boring as an expertise, but the majority of late game roadblocks are always caused by a lack of standard or advanced components. This will give you a colonist that practically assembles them in their sleep. Remember your ABCs for Rimworld. Always buy components. Onto art. You now have the choice between quality or quantity. Is this even a question for art? Quality. Always quality. A single high quality sculpture made from a good material like jade or marble will provide a much better impact than throwing a bunch of crappy sculptures all over the place.
Bullshit. Bullshit. Derivative.
Medical expertise choices are surgery, first aid, or nursing. Surgery is a bit of a trap, because by the time you have the 15 skill required to pick up the expertise, the affected stats are already so high that the only way surgery goes wrong is because of the permanent 2% failure chance. So the only thing this is going to help with is if you're performing surgery on the ground or in an open field. First aid is what you actually want, boosting medical 10 speed, allowing you to get through an entire ward of injuries in just an hour or two. No more watching the seconds tick down on blood loss and crossing your fingers that bandages are applied in time. Nursing will increase medical 10 quality, but this value is still going to be locked to the highest potential that the selected medicine can achieve. It won't somehow push your glitter worlds up into the 200%, even with Unlimited. So again, it's a bit of a trap. This will mainly allow you to provide better 10s when stabilising people in a critical condition before actually moving them to a hospital, like if a potential prisoner only has an hour left to live and probably wouldn't make the trip. Social skills gets you wardening, negotiating, and proselytizing. Wardening gives you the widest effect of the three, boosting arrest success chance, suppression power, and recruitment rate. Suppression will only really matter if you're making use of slaves, but the other two skills are consistently useful to have around, with recruitment rate allowing you to breeze through an entire raid's worth of prisoners. You'll mainly be taking negotiating for the trade price improvement, as peace talks will usually be a positive outcome if you've already got that 15 social. It's just a bit of a win more stat. As with most trade price improvements, the benefit is added before the social skill impact, so it always brings it down pretty hard. You need to seriously stack trade price bonuses for it to really work for you. Proselytizing is insanely useful if you're playing with ideology. With this at max power, it gives you the potential to one-shot individuals over to your ideology with a single use of the convert skill. Fantastic if you have wanderers join that follow another creed, or if you invited a visitor to stay with you that utterly hates how your colony works and is constantly having mental breaks or threatening to go home and fail the quest. And finally, for intellectual, you have synthesizing, hacking, and researching. Drug synthesis does the other half of production that drug cooking doesn't, so your flake, yayo, go juice, wake up, penoxycyllin, and most importantly, medicine. Sadly, serums from Anomaly count as a crafting skill, so you won't be getting any bonuses to that. It's an easy pick if you're running a drug empire, with the only real downside being you're going to need biblical quantities of raw ingredients to keep the crafter with this expertise in work, as most synthesis is already a pretty quick job to begin with.
That is a shopping list. Getting some of those items may be challenging.
Hacking is great if you're playing with the Ancients faction enabled, as it'll let you get into vaults in a reasonable time frame. Outside of that, it can help with the occasional quest that you'll get, likely for relics, that sees a ship crash land on your map and require hacking, while sending constant waves of enemies your way. This lets you hack quickly enough to save yourself a wave or two of combat. But yeah, outside of vanilla, this is pretty niche. Researching is kind of the obvious choice here, but equally, you'll breeze through the entire tech tree so fast with this expertise that it might end up going to waste, as there's simply no more projects left to study at some point. With synthesis or hacking, it will always have some potential use, even if it's a little bit more niche. And those are all your skills. If you want to take it further, there is the Unreasonable Expertise mod on the workshop that adds even more potential options, including some interesting choices, shall we say, like licenses for skilled colonists that will increase their silver and honour value, making them more worthwhile to slavers. It can be useful if you don't intend to keep somebody around for the long term and they happen to have a single decent stat, letting them earn a bit of additional market value whilst you wait for the next trade caravan that can take them away. I definitely recommend keeping the mod settings on this down to the default 1 for expertise per colonist though, as this isn't something that enemies can make use of. Raiders may come in with a high enough stat to be able to unlock one of these upgrades, but they will never make use of it for themselves. It's purely a player power mod, which makes it unbalanced by its nature. Just a few ranged fighters with reloading and the sharpshooting AoE from ideology will be enough to keep your entire colony safe in most cases, rendering you completely safe from practically all threats besides boredom. When you get to the late game using this, the normal end for most colonies is you clicking save and quit to menu and then simply never going back to them. One of the VE mods to approach with caution, for sure, perhaps try to limit yourself to only taking the non-combat expertise paths if possible. Thanks for watching, folks. If you have any mods you'd like to see a full breakdown for, or suggestions for mods you'd like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments. I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon or evening. Take care.